The air thinned with every mile Cynthia Ramirez's imported all-terrain SUV climbed, a crisp, pine-scented chill replacing the humid, gasoline-laced breath of the city. 6 years. 6 long years since she had last navigated the treacherous, washed-out logging road, known only to the few souls dedicated to the remote mountain post. When she left, she was a frantic, heartbroken 26-year-old, carrying a duffel bag and a desperate, half-formed idea. Now at 32, she was the CEO of Phoenix Environmental Systems, a multi-million-dollar company that specialized in predictive fire mapping and drone surveillance. She was wearing tailored wool and the scent of success, yet her hands, gripping the custom-stitched leather steering wheel, trembled with the old familiar fear of inadequacy, the fear that had always accompanied her proximity to Joshua Jackson. The mountain itself, old Mount Cinder, loomed before her, not majestic as in memory, but rather bruised and forgotten, the dense green broken by patches of scorched earth from recent minor blazes. The road twisted, forcing her to focus, but her mind was a whirlwind of the past. She had loved this life, the quiet solitude, the smell of burnt cedar, the man whose hands were rough from climbing fire towers and whose eyes held the endless blue of the sky. But love, she had learned, was a poor shield against bankruptcy and crushing silent pride. Joshua, a third-generation forest fire lookout, had believed that sweat, gut instinct, and the archaic tools of his forefathers were all that was needed to protect his mountain. She, who saw the future in algorithms and infrared sensors, had been dismissed, her innovative ideas deemed a betrayal of tradition. The debts had mounted, the government funding had dried up. She had watched him slowly wither, the fire in his soul dimming under the weight of financial ruin and the relentless solitude. The final gate, a rusted chain-link barrier that marked the perimeter of the summit fire post, scraped harshly against the gravel as she pushed it open. It was worse than she had imagined. The main cabin, which had been structurally sound but worn when she departed, now sagged visibly, patches of plywood replacing missing cedar siding. The iconic tall communication tower, the symbol of Joshua's post and his pride, was listing slightly, a tangle of corroded cables hanging loose like severed nerves. The entire property exuded a sense of abject failure, a physical manifestation of the despair she had run from. The vehicles were a testament to abandonment. A dilapidated olive-green pickup truck with a shattered rear window sat next to a relic of a brush truck, its tires flat and its paint faded to the color of rust. The air was silent, unnaturally so. No radio chatter, no generator hum, just the wind whistling a mournful song through the broken antenna wires. She parked her gleaming silver-gray SUV a discreet distance from the cabin, not wanting the flash of her success to be the first weapon in their impending war. She needed to breathe to steady the frantic pounding in her chest. For years she had prepared for this moment, not by practicing apologies, but by constructing an empire, a solution so comprehensive, so financially unassailable, that even Joshua's monumental pride could not refuse it. Inside her sleek leather satchel were documents, a full financial portfolio, blueprints for a state-of-the-art solar array, and the legal framework for a complete, integrated fire management partnership. She hadn't returned for nostalgia. She had returned to execute a rescue mission, whether he welcomed it or not. In the distance, behind the main cabin, she spotted him. Joshua, now 43, was in the small, open-air maintenance shed, wrestling with a massive, oily piece of machinery, likely the antique diesel generator that hadn't worked properly even a decade ago. He was turned away from her, but she recognized the stooped posture, the way his broad shoulders, once straight and proud in his uniform, were now permanently slumped under an invisible burden. His hair, dark and thick, was noticeably threaded with silver at the nape of his neck, and his movements were slow, methodical, and exhausting to watch. The once vibrant blue of his work shirt was bleached pale, covered in grime and oil stains that seemed to mirror the deep lines etched around his eyes. He didn't look like a man fighting fires. He looked like a man being consumed by them. He suddenly paused, dropping a heavy wrench with a clatter that echoed through the stillness. It was the sound of her car door closing, soft as it had been, that had finally broken through his concentration. Slowly, deliberately, as if bracing himself against a physical blow, he turned. 6 years vanished in that moment. The 18-foot expanse of cracked concrete separating them became an insurmountable canyon, filled with unspoken pain, betrayal, and unquenchable love. His eyes, the startling blue she remembered, were now dull, guarded, and laced with a weariness that went bone deep. She saw the surprise bloom first, raw and undeniable, followed swiftly by a wall of hardened anger and agonizing loss. He didn't speak. He didn't move. He simply stared, the wrench still dangling from his hand, his mouth set in a thin, unforgiving line. Cynthia felt the perfectly constructed armor of her CEO persona shatter. She wanted to run to him, to wipe the grease from his cheek, to tell him that every second of those 6 years had been a brutal penance for the crime of leaving him, and that every penny she had earned was merely fuel for the single purpose of saving him. But she held her ground, her chin raised slightly, fighting the burn of tears behind her eyes. She was here as a business partner, not a repentant wife. She had to be strong. Finally, the silence, thick and suffocating, was broken by Joshua's voice. It was hoarse, gravelly, stripped of all warmth. "You came back here." It wasn't a question, but a statement of disbelief and bitter accusation. "After 6 years, you finally found the time to drive up the mountain." "I needed to, Joshua," she replied, her voice steady despite the seismic shift in her gut. I needed to see if the post was still standing." A harsh, humorless laugh escaped him. He gestured with his chin toward the dilapidated cabin and the leaning tower. "Well, as you can see, we're not exactly thriving, still fighting the good fight, one broken part at a time. The way I like it, or the way I've been forced to keep it." He took a step toward her, closing the distance with slow, deliberate steps that felt both menacing and heartbreaking. His clothes smelled of oil, sweat, and wood smoke, the familiar scent of his life, a life she had been excluded from. "You came all the way up here in that machine," he continued, eyes flicking over her luxurious SUV, "just to check on the structural integrity of the place you abandoned." "I came back to fix it, Joshua," Cynthia stated plainly, her tone shifting to the decisive cadence she used in boardrooms. "To save the post and maybe to save us." She reached into her satchel and pulled out the thick envelope containing the partnership documents and the financial projections. She held it out to him, a peace offering and a declaration of war simultaneously. "I didn't run away, Joshua. I went to forge the tools we needed to survive this, and now I have them." He didn't take the envelope. He only looked at her hands, then back up to her eyes, the blue now cold and utterly unforgiving. "Tools. You left me to lose this post, to lose everything, while you were out there building your empire of tools. You think this," he spat the word, gesturing toward her clothes and car, "will erase 6 years of silence? 6 years of me going to sleep every night wondering what I did wrong, wondering why the woman who swore to protect me left me to deal with a debt collector's mountain." His words were bullets, each one striking its mark, tearing through her professional facade. "It was never about you, Joshua," she pleaded, dropping the envelope slightly. "It was about your pride and my desperation. I watched you lose yourself clinging to antiquated methods, while the world and the fires got smarter. I saw the inevitable collapse, and I had 2 choices: stay here and burn with you, or leave and build a firebreak. I chose the firebreak." He shook his head, the movement tired and resigned. "You chose yourself, Cynthia. Don't try to wrap it in a pretty package of saving me. You chose the city, the money, the easy way out. And now you're back, thinking a big check can fix a broken heart and a broken life." He finally reached out, not to take the envelope, but to push her hand away gently, with a terrible finality. "I don't need your charity, Joshua. I need the woman who stood by me, not the one who ran." The rejection, cloaked in that quiet, devastating certainty, was more painful than any shouted accusation. She knew, deep down, that her departure, however well-intentioned, had wounded him beyond measure. But she also knew that the proud, stubborn man before her was still worth fighting for, and that the only thing keeping him alive was the mountain he refused to lose. "This is not charity, Joshua. It's a professional investment. I can save this post and give you the resources to protect this forest without ever putting your life at risk again," she insisted, her voice trembling now. "I built Phoenix for this. For you. Just look at the proposal. Just give me one day to show you what I've accomplished." He let out a long, shuddering breath, staring at the envelope in her hand, as if it were a venomous snake. The internal struggle was visible, the raw hunger for a lifeline battling the fierce, ingrained pride of a man who had sworn never to depend on anyone, especially the woman who had hurt him most. "One day," he finally conceded, his voice low and dangerous, "you get until tomorrow night. Show me your numbers. Show me your tools. But don't expect forgiveness and don't expect to sleep under my roof." He turned abruptly, walking back toward the cabin with the same slow, heavy steps. "The guest cabin is still there, down by the creek, and keep your machine out of my sight." Cynthia watched him disappear into the shadows of the cabin. She was on the mountain, she had seen him, and the fight had begun. It was going to be harder and far more emotionally costly than she had ever anticipated. She was a CEO, a negotiator, a financial powerhouse, but here, on this desolate, forgotten peak, she was simply a woman trying to buy back the love she had once abandoned. The first 24 hours were an agonizing exercise in proximity without intimacy. Cynthia relocated to the tiny, damp guest cabin, a structure that smelled faintly of mildew and forgotten summers, a stark contrast to the sterile luxury of her Seattle apartment. She spent the entire next morning observing Joshua, her polished tablet recording every flawed process, every dangerous improvisation. He worked with a silent, punishing intensity, ignoring her presence with a disciplined focus that spoke volumes of his enduring pain. She watched him risk his life climbing the leaning tower to adjust a weather vane that could easily have been automated. She saw him meticulously hand-sharpening rusted hand tools, a futile attempt to make up for the lack of modern equipment. His body was a map of 6 years of solitude and strain. Scars on his knuckles, a barely noticeable limp, and the constant grimace of weariness etched into his features. At dusk, she confronted him on the dilapidated porch, laying out her entire proposal. Her voice, usually confident and resonant in a lecture hall, wavered only slightly as she explained the technical brilliance of her solution. "Joshua, look at this. This isn't a small-town fix. It's a total overhaul. Phoenix will inject $650,000 into the post immediately. That covers all outstanding debts, the new cabin structure, and a complete communications array. More importantly," she tapped the screen, displaying a complex topographical map overlaid with thermal imaging data. "It integrates the post into our new Sentinel AI system. We'll install a perimeter of solar-powered drone hubs, giving you 24/7 real-time thermal monitoring. You won't have to rely on sight, on instinct, or on risking a climb every hour. This will reduce your detection time by 85%, which up here means saving entire valleys." She paused, letting the sheer magnitude of the technology sink in. She had done her homework down to the last bolt and wire, tailoring the solution specifically for Mount Cinder's unique microclimate and topography. "In exchange," she continued, steeling herself, "Phoenix gets a 40% operational partnership. You retain the majority stake, the title to the land, and the day-to-day management authority. You will still be the ranger here, but you'll be leading a team of engineers and running the most advanced fire detection post on the West Coast. This isn't selling out. It's scaling up. It's survival." Joshua listened in total silence, his face an unreadable mask, save for the slight twitching in his jaw. When she finished, he didn't even glance at the documents. Instead, his eyes went to her hands, noting the delicate, expensive platinum ring she now wore, a symbol of corporate success, not matrimonial bond. 400 acres of Jackson land, he finally said, his voice dangerously quiet. "My grandfather built this station by hand. My father died fighting a fire protecting this exact spot. And you want me to sign away 40% of their legacy, their dignity to you, the woman who walked out when the fight got real." He stood up abruptly, towering over her, his 6-foot-plus frame radiating raw, controlled fury. "You call this a professional investment, Cynthia. I call it a ransom note. You built your fortune on the very technology I refused to adopt, the thing you warned me would save us. And now you return armed with proof of my failure, offering me my own dignity back for a slice of my inheritance. It's a masterful negotiation, I'll give you that. But no." He slammed his fist, not on the table, but into the nearest wooden support pillar, the impact dull and forceful. "It's not about the land, Joshua, it's about the mission," she countered, rising to face him. "This mountain is dying slowly. You're operating with gear older than I am. Last year, the Juniper Creek fire nearly took out half the reservation because your radio failed. Your dignity is killing people, Joshua, because your pride won't allow you to admit that the old ways sometimes break." His face was contorted in a mixture of pain and blind rage. "My pride? You think I enjoy eating canned beans 3 times a day just to pay the water bill? You think I'm proud of having the bank threaten to auction this post? I was working 18 hours a day, Cynthia, alone, freezing my ass off in winter, burning up in summer, praying that the next lightning strike wouldn't be the end of it. And every minute I thought of you. I thought, she found the easier path. She got the comfort. She got the escape. And now you stand here talking about my broken dignity, when you shattered mine the day you didn't even leave a proper note. I left you a note, she cried, the tears finally bursting through the dam of her professional resolve. It was short, yes, because I knew if I stayed one more minute, if I looked at you one more time, I wouldn't be able to leave. I told you I couldn't watch you break yourself. I said I needed to find a solution that required 6 years of silence and a return in a car worth more than this entire post, he demanded, his voice cracking with emotion. You can't fix a man's confidence with money, Cynthia, and you can't buy back a marriage with a partnership agreement. He took the thick envelope, and with an unnerving calm that frightened her more than his rage, he placed it back into her hand. The answer is no. You have until the morning after tomorrow. That was the deal. 2 more days. Then you take your Sentinel AI and your $650,000 and you drive back down that mountain. I won't let you turn my family's legacy into your corporate tax write-off. He turned away, leaving her standing alone on the porch, the documents burning her hands like hot coals. Her carefully constructed plan had failed. The technological and financial brilliance of her proposal meant nothing against the bedrock of his wounded pride and the sheer magnitude of the trust she had destroyed. Over the next 2 days, Cynthia abandoned the corporate facade completely. She put on the old worn denim and leather boots she'd packed, the ones she used to wear when they patrolled the lower slopes together. She began working in silence, methodically, not with the modern tools she possessed, but with the old broken ones he used. She spent hours cleaning the years of rust off the ancient fire pump, sanding down the warped wooden planks of the porch, and manually clearing the thick, overgrown brush from the fire lane. She was doing the back-breaking, low-tech labor he respected, not as a former wife, but as a silent, efficient helper. Joshua watched her. He pretended not to, but she saw the fleeting, surprised glances. He saw the blister forming on her soft CEO hand as she wielded a shovel, and he saw the determination in her eyes as she patiently tried to revive a rusted gate hinge with oil and elbow grease. He never thanked her, never spoke more than a terse instruction, but he didn't tell her to stop. One evening, Cynthia found a ledger on his desk, not the detailed financial report she'd hoped for, but a handwritten log of every fire, every close call, and every successful intervention he'd made over the past 6 years. She saw the careful, almost artistic calligraphy of his entries, the weight of responsibility evident in every word. On the very last page, tucked in the corner beneath the final expense column, was a small, faded photograph of them from their wedding day, laughing beneath the pines. It was creased, worn thin from handling. He hadn't just been holding onto the post, he had been holding onto a ghost of her, the ghost of them. He hadn't moved on at all. This wasn't about a business deal. It was a desperate battle for his soul. He had stayed on the mountain, not to prove her wrong, but to prove to himself that he was still the man she had loved, a man who could protect his own, even if it meant destroying himself in the process. He needed more than a partnership. He needed to be seen, truly seen, for the broken, heroic struggle he had endured in her absence. He came into the kitchen later that night, the scent of smoke and exhaustion clinging to him, looking even more drained than usual. He found her staring out the window, not at the mountains, but at the reflection of her own face, marred by worry and tears. The 2-day deadline was almost up. This time, when she reached for the envelope of documents, he stopped her. He didn't say the word, but his eyes held a plea for a different conversation, one that had nothing to do with percentages or technology. The air inside the small rustic cabin was heavy, charged with the tension of unspoken truths and the weight of 6 lost years. Joshua stood leaning against the rough-hewn counter, his shoulders still slumped with the exhaustion of his vigil. The deadline was hours away. He had the power to dismiss her, to send her and her bright, overwhelming future back to the city, preserving his miserable, lonely dignity. He watched Cynthia, who had finally put the business proposal aside, her shoulders bare of the armor of her corporate success. She looked, at that moment, like the woman he had loved, vulnerable, fierce, and desperately unhappy. "Why didn't you ever call, Joshua?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper, turning from the window. "Not one message, not one text, just silence. Did you hate me that much?" He ran a weary hand over his face, a gesture of profound fatigue. "Hate you? God, Cynthia, no." He pushed off the counter and walked toward the ancient wood-burning stove, resting his hand on its cold, unlit surface. "I never called because I was afraid of what I'd hear and what I'd be forced to say. I was afraid you'd tell me you were happy, that you'd found some clean-cut city boy who understood algorithms and stocks, a man who wasn't covered in soot and debt. And if you'd told me that—" He paused, taking a ragged breath that sounded like a sob caught in his throat. "I don't think I would have been able to stop the bank from taking the post. You were my last reason to fight, the last sliver of hope that kept me shoveling snow and fixing rusted valves. If I'd admitted how bad it was, if I'd admitted you were right, I thought you'd see me as the failure I truly was." His voice cracked, revealing a deep well of buried pain that years of stoicism had failed to conceal. "3 years ago, the debt collectors showed up here. They gave me 2 months. I sat right here, in this chair, and was ready to sign the papers, walk away and just disappear into the woods. But I looked up at the old fire tower, the one my grandfather built, and I saw your face from that wedding photo. And I knew you left because you believed I could be better, that I deserved a future I was too proud to fight for. I had to prove I could save it, Cynthia. I had to save this mountain, this legacy, so that if you ever did come back, I wouldn't have to face you empty-handed. I had to earn back the respect you lost for me. I needed to know I was still Joshua Jackson, the man who protected this mountain, not the fool who let everything burn." He turned to face her, his eyes glistening with unshed tears, the blue of them finally breaking through the weariness. "I didn't try to find you because I didn't want you to see me like this, defeated, broken, living on dried rations and desperation. I preferred you to remember the strong man you married, the one with all the answers, not the ghost I became." The admission, raw and utterly vulnerable, shattered the last of Cynthia's defenses. She walked to him, not as a CEO or a failed wife, but simply as a woman who understood the depths of his sacrifice. She reached out and touched his cheek, her fingers tracing the rough, stubbled line of his jaw. "You are the strongest man I have ever known, Joshua. You survived 6 years of total isolation and financial disaster, operating a critical fire post with less than zero support. You saved the mountain not with drones, but with heart. That is courage. That is strength." She pulled his hands, scarred and calloused, away from the stove and held them firmly in her own, the expensive silk of her shirt pressing against the grimy denim of his. "I didn't leave because I thought you were a failure. I left because I loved you too much to watch your incredible strength burn itself out in a losing battle. I left to find a bigger water supply, to build an army." Tears streamed freely down her cheeks, but her voice was firm, resonating with conviction. The company, the tech, the money, it was all a means to an end. Every drone launch, every investment round, every sleepless night was about one single terrifying goal: to be able to look you in the eye and say, "I didn't run. I was fighting for our future. I came back for you, Joshua. The post was just the excuse, the mechanism. I came back because I never, ever stopped loving you." The dam of his stoicism finally burst. He pulled her into a crushing embrace, the sheer force of his emotion causing his body to tremble violently. He buried his face in her hair, the agonizing 6-year weight of his loneliness dissolving in a torrent of silent, desperate sobs. They stood there, two halves of a whole, broken people trying to mend each other's wounds with the simple, powerful act of holding on. When they finally pulled apart, their faces were wet, their eyes red, but the air between them was clean, scrubbed free of the corrosive elements of pride and resentment. "I don't know if I can forgive the leaving, Cynthia," he whispered, his voice still thick with emotion, "but I know I can't live another day without the coming back." He looked at the envelope of documents, which she had dropped when he embraced him. "I'll sign, not for the technology or the money, but for the chance to fight the next fire with you, on the same team side by side." The next morning, the papers were signed. A handshake sealing a 40% operational partnership was a professional act, but the lingering touch of their hands was a promise of a personal future. Within 2 weeks, the desolate summit post was a hive of activity. Engineers in clean vests worked alongside Joshua, who, finally unburdened, directed the work with renewed vigor. The rusted tower was reinforced, then topped with a sleek satellite-fed sensor package. Drone bays were installed, buzzing quietly with the power of their new Sentinel AI system. The post became a cutting-edge hub, its survival ensured not by one man's struggle, but by a powerful technological partnership. Joshua, no longer a solitary lookout, was now a ranger-in-chief, his passion multiplied by Cynthia's vision. On a quiet evening, sitting together on the newly repaired porch, watching their first successful nighttime drone patrol sweep the horizon, Joshua turned to Cynthia. She was wearing the platinum ring, but her hand felt small and familiar in his. "I need to show you something," she said quietly, reaching into the pocket of her work jacket. She pulled out a small tarnished silver object, wrapped carefully in tissue paper. It wasn't a wedding ring. It was the small engraved silver matchbox she had given him on their second anniversary, the one he always carried in his pocket to light his kerosene lamp, the one he thought he had lost in the Juniper Creek fire. He had told her it was lost years ago. "I didn't lose it," she confessed softly, opening the box to reveal a new, perfectly sized waterproof match inside. "I took it the night I left. It was the only piece of you I allowed myself to keep. I told myself that one day I would return it to you full of fire and ask you to light a new flame with me." Joshua took the matchbox, his thumb tracing the worn, personalized engraving, "Always our Summit." He looked at the tiny, perfect match within, then up at the strong, brilliant woman beside him. He opened his palm, placed the matchbox into her hand, and then closed his own rough fingers around hers. "I don't need the match, Cynthia," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You are the fire." He didn't ask her to marry him again or to put a ring on his finger. Instead, he simply pulled her close, resting his forehead against hers, a gesture that encompassed forgiveness, partnership, and a love that had proven itself stronger than both pride and distance. They had learned that true courage isn't found in enduring solitary suffering, but in the humility to change and the strength to accept help from the one person who truly knows how to save you. Their story was the mountain story, broken, scorched, but now finally starting to regrow, stronger and more resilient than before.